All right, welcome to today's webinar on the importance of your SMSF pension documents. And I'm sure you're here today because you are well aware of the ever-growing importance of the payment of income streams and therefore the challenges that are presented in the way in which pension documents are constructed, how they align themselves to the SMSF deed, and therefore how we manage those risks and the opportunities that naturally come across these pensions as well. So today is a practical but also technical session overlay, which is what these product demos are all about, to help you understand why your pension documents are so important and the differences that you should be looking for in pension documentation, including when you might be just utilizing your SMSF specific software templates, as opposed to and compared with something like what we have within Smarter SMSF. So today's session, I'm going to take you through initially a state of play on SMSF pensions. We'll then look at the understanding of what your existing pension documents might have or might not have, and what therefore you should be looking for and asking questions of. And from there, I'm going to take us into our new SMSF pension document. So we are, and we have now made these available in beta. We are putting the integrations through all these at the moment, adding these into the Simple Fund 360 integration that we have within BGL as well. So making sure that you understand why we have done what we've done with the advancements. Our pension documents were already one of the most comprehensive that we had in the marketplace today. Arguably, after you have a look at these today, you will recognize that they are the most comprehensive in terms of not only the content, but the questions that we're asking throughout the ordering process, but why these questions become important for your SMSF clients as well. And then we'll finish off helping you understand a bit more about the suite of pension documents that we have, and we'll have some time at the back for a little bit of Q&A as well. So where are we in the context of our SMSF pensions? Well, historically, we have had a bit of a gap around what is available with our compliance documents. Many of you, like me, over the journey, we maybe rely upon our SMSF software to do some things, and then we would need to rely on our own expertise to be able to develop particular templates at different points in time and naturally maintain the currency of those templates. Historically, they have also been due to members in accumulation, but strategies, again, throughout the past 5 and 10 years, even more, as we've moved into retirement, have meant we've now needed to deal with things like starting pensions, commuting pensions, making elections around pensions to comply with the transfer balance cap, incapacity, death benefits, reversionaries, you name it. So many of these things have really been a gap in our industry that now need to be addressed. And it has therefore been a challenge for us about how are we producing those? Do we know whether they're correct? And are we actually carrying forward, or are we actually recognizing the time that is involved is being put into that work that needs to be done? Now, the reason why this is all important is because we do have a much greater risk in getting these things right than ever before. And our binding death benefit nomination cases that we have seen over the past decade or so, or even going back to 2005 with Katz and Grossman, really focus on and put the attention into the fact that this documentation is absolutely and must be categorically correct. Now, that is not only in respect to BDBNs, but also is transpiring in the way in which income streams are being presented, and then naturally a number of other compliance documents, which we're seeing for audit purposes as well. And this, therefore, because of this expectation with auditors and the fact that the regulator is spending a much greater time and focus on the standards in which we must comply with, again, we have a heightened expectation on that documentation. And the natural effect of this has been in the industry is, well, I have SMSF software, so therefore my software provider should be the one, or is it the one that is actually giving me this information? And whilst to some extent we see the software providers provide information that supports some of these compliance activities, in many instances, their focus is they are a technology company. They are software providers. Yes, they work within SMSFs, but the information and the templates that they provide are generic because they recognize that there is multiple service providers in the industry, and therefore the way in which documentation is provided has little or no alignment to particular funds governing rules. And a good example of this is why BGL then sort of sought us out to do a direct integration into their software to help address some of those particular issues with their clients. So the flip side to that is like I said before, where the information is not readily available, we become the individuals or the experts ourselves that has to document this. If we don't want to be using the templates that are available within our software because we recognize the alignment issues to our governing rules, well, then we end up in a situation where all these different internal templates get created, aligning to the deed, which is all fine. And we know many specialists out there would have the capability to do this. But the challenge is how practical does that become in your business to maintaining the currency of that information and ensuring you can leverage technology that will allow you to do that efficiently and effectively. So that's really where we're at in terms of that compliance issue. Now, in terms of the types of pensions, one of the things, and I guess the most common question we get asked at Smarter SMSF when it comes to pensions is this question here, and it came through one of our tickets some time ago. So we currently prepare pension docs for our clients from within our SMSF software. It's the most efficient way to complete this, but the more I read on the topic, the more I'm starting to question whether this is the right approach we should be taking for our clients. So what are the potential gaps that you see, i.e. the risks and the issues in using this approach? And this is why we wanted to spend some time today to help you understand what these are and then how we address these through our Smarter SMSF documents. So let's get stuck into understanding your SMSF pension documents. So I've got here a couple of extracts. I'm not going to say the software providers, you'll probably be able to work them out anyway from this here. But what you have in the first instance is either resolutions or minutes of meeting that actually set out the pension is intending on commencing. Now, the assumption here that is made first and foremost that the pension can be established by resolutions or minutes. So the first thing you need to be asking yourself is that an actual accepted form of documentation to be able to start the income stream with the fund's deed? Okay, so I know of providers in the marketplace today that require a formal agreement or a contract that clearly the resolutions that are available within your SMSF software will not satisfy that pension has been effectively started. So again, the very first point is understanding the format in which your documents can and must therefore be created in. Now, if we think about some of these issues and we look to our what I call our pensions Bible ruling, and this is TR 2013-5 around when a pension commences and when a pension ceases for income tax purposes. Now, what the ruling talks about here is that it says it must be determined by reference to the terms and conditions of the superannuation income stream that are agreed to by the trustee and the member. And the rules of the income stream are therefore set out by virtue of the governing rules. So here, what we must have is an agreement between the trustee and the member. So you can't simply have documentation that is one way. So we can't just say the trustee hereby agrees to pay a pension. We need that consent between both parties that in essence forms a contract. And where we have that contract between the parties, it then gives us the scope to think about other changes that could be made along the way, as long as the governing rules of the deed and or the pension allow us to do so. So you can see here under the Smarter SMSF deed, we keep this quite simple. And we do this in a way that is quite simple because we don't want to prescribe information within the deed, which means every time we see a change of law, we would need to potentially amend the deed to allow for these things to occur. So Rule 25.1 here says, subject to the superannuation laws, without limiting the powers of the trustee, the following superannuation benefits in essence can be paid. So where we've met a condition of release with a nil cashing condition, there would be an ability to take a lump sum and or commence one or more income streams at any point in time. Now, one of the really important things to note here is that if we have quite broad powers, we need to ensure somewhere where we actually have some specific procedures within the documentation. So again, there's a few questions you need to be asking here. So what are the terms and conditions that are being referenced within the income stream? So are they explicit within the pension documents, or are they silent and rely upon references back to the deed? So again, what you don't want to have here is what I call these circular arguments. So in a deed like we have here at Smarter SMSF, and again, this is a common approach with some deeds, is that we have a fairly generic referencing of the pension, the ability to pay pensions and the powers to pay pensions, which therefore means we can't be bland in the operation of our pension documents. Because if we say that the pension documents broadly say, yeah, it can be paid in accordance with the deed, and the deed actually says, well, yeah, you can pay a pension. Well, what are we relying upon to evidence the fact that this pension sets out the way in which these rules would naturally work? So our pension documents therefore become much more particular in how that will actually operate. And I'll come back to that I'll show you the sample documents shortly that explains that in a bit more detail. So the other things here is, how does the deed define how the agreement applies to start the pension? So again, are we looking at it by deed, by resolution, or some other mechanism that we spoke about before? And as I touched on, it must be two-way. So we have a contractual agreement or arrangement between the member and the trustee. We also need to think about what type of income can be paid. And do any special rules apply to this? We have the requirements set out in Reg 106 and specifically 106.9a for account-based pensions, but we may want to add layers to that, potentially add additional conditions into the income stream if we wanted to. There's nothing that prevents or prescribes us from doing so. So this final question then comes at it: if you are using standard pension documents, have you reviewed these against the deed to ensure that you're not putting up any potential risks as to the operation of that income stream itself? So again, just start to think about some of these particular issues. The other one is around a PDS. And this is something that, again, from a software point of view, you're not going to be seeing a PDS issued. Now, the Corporations Act here talks about the fact that it requires a PDS be issued when a member converts from accumulation into pension phase. And that is clear. It's set out in section 1012B of the Corps Act. Now, there are a limited exemption that applies, but it only applies if it is on reasonable grounds to believe that the member has received or has and knows they have access to all of the information that the PDS would be required to contain. So the argument is, well, do we need to give it to a self-managed super fund member where they're also the trustee and they're meant to know everything in respect to the operation of their self-managed super fund, so therefore we don't actually need to issue it? I think that actually poses a pretty serious risk, because your decision to not give them a product disclosure statement means that you're inferring that they are aware of all these responsibilities and issues that potentially come about with the commencement of that income stream. So by not issuing them that PDS, the reality is they may not have made an informed decision, and could that actually come back and bite you at some other point in time in the future? So the default position, the client understanding as a member, is insufficient, in my view, So I would say the default view is that you would issue a PDS. So to rely upon that limited exemption, you are making that decision for the client, in my view, as opposed to them making that decision in their own right. And again, our software do not provide a PDS, as there's no conditions specific to a particular deed as to the governing rules of the fund. So understanding what would be contained within a PDS, and again, we've got our sample document here that you can have a look at and go through and understand what that PDS would contain, the types and terms of the pension, the admin tax, legal, actuarial considerations in establishing and running the pension, advantages and disadvantages of those pensions, the T-bar requirements, transfer balance cap measurements, estate planning, commutations, reversionaries, all those sorts of things fall within the confines of that product disclosure statement. And we have a specific pension product disclosure statement as distinct from the product disclosure statement that we issue when we commence a self-managed super fund. So let's maybe at this point jump across and have a quick look at some of that documentation. I wasn't going to do it now, but now is better than any time. So in our knowledge base, you can go in and you can simply search for pension commencement. And then in here, if you actually click on that, you'll be able to see the sample document. And in this here, what we have is naturally, if I've obviously looked at this one before with our product disclosure statement here behind our other documentation that we had above, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you can see in here, it's talking about the requirement of the PDS, the benefits, the payment of the income stream, the types of pensions, the minimum pension factors, reversionaries, the ability to do segregation, the reforms previously, what counts towards the caps as debits and credits, the reporting regime for T-bar. And again, these are things that we are updating as we go along to account for the changes to things like reduced minimums, to things like the new reporting requirements that will apply from the 1st of July 2023, the taxation of benefits, and much, much more. So again, specific things that will help the client to understand their benefit they're being paid as a member, but then the natural flow and effect that that'll have in their responsibility as a trustee for the fund in paying that income stream as well. And again, we've got a number of schedules and stuff that sit there within that sample, but get updated each and every year. So in my view, PDSs play a really important role in this process because of the fact that it does actually have a mandated requirement within 102B when we flick from accumulation to pension. So the other thing that we've done, and this will form part, or this does form part of our new pension suite, is the fact that we have this time lag between where pensions potentially start and when you physically get the ability to then do that documentation. So what we've got here is now the introduction of a two-step process in respect to our pension documentation. And so we have here, if the pension is to start on the 1st of July, but naturally we haven't got our accounts completed, we would ordinarily allow ourselves to do an estimate. And this is what APRA funds do. SMSF documentation, typically, when we look at our SMSF software, we'll go back to that 1st of July date, even though we may be doing the work in August, November, whatever the case may be. So then the question is, well, can we actually start a pension if we don't have a balance to start with? And the short answer is yes, we can. And we're just simply following a process here whereby we would be starting that income stream and referencing the fact that the confirmation of the commencement date will occur at a subsequent period. So this really came to light with one of our members in the last 6 or 8 months, where we started the journey on building these updated pension documents. And this is where we had, for all intent and purposes, this client was to start the pension on the 1st of July of that particular income year. Now, they lost capacity at some point thereafter and subsequently died before the documentation got produced on our site. Now, the way that our pension documents work is that there is an initial oral request that then confirms that request to have started that pension on the 1st of July. So you never need to backdate our documents that we have on the Smarter SMSF platform. So if I go back to our pension documents, what you'll see in the initial request is that I hereby confirm my previous oral request in writing to commence on a particular point in time. So from that point of view, what the intent here was that we would have the pension starting at the 1st of July. The accounts were being done and to be finalised in November, but that individual died in October. Now, because there was someone there that acted as the EPA, we were able to have that legal personal representative, in essence, sign that paperwork. But a way that we'd be able to work around that as an issue is that let's just get the paperwork done initially that says the members intended to start a pension. Then from there, subsequent to that, once the accounts have been done, or we've used some other way in which we can determine the commencement value, we then produce what I call stage 2 of that documentation. So that's really what this diagram is talking about, and enables you to now walk through and undertake that process through this ordering approach. Okay, so most importantly, we've got a functionality built into the technology that once you have saved that initial order, you will be able to then go back to your saved orders and finish that order off. So you're not having to start again. You'll be able to, in essence, pick up that order and then go through and do step 2. So again, let's just maybe jump over to our pension document, and I'll show you what I mean here. So what we have is inside here, obviously our 70 or 80 documents that we have on the site. I've just searched in pension there, which now means you can see this information in here, and we have our order now. So I'm just going to jump forward to find out where we have a document here that we might be able to use. So I'm just going to resume one that I've got here for the VOS SMSF. And what we can see with this process is naturally we can use our integrations with BGL, with Class, and now SuperMate to be able to pull the core information about this income stream into the fund. So even if we don't know the balance, we can still use the integration here to populate information about the fund address, the trustee details, who the directors are, and that sort of stuff. We then will choose our particular member. And again, the integration, if you have multiple income streams being started in a year, the functionality of the API will allow you to pull in multiple pensions, and they'll be stored in your saved orders to be able to produce the different documentation for those 1, 2, or 3 pensions that you might have started during the year. So I've got Jack here, we've got his male, date of birth, and so forth. And then in the pension document, this next page, what you're going to see is it will do the calculation of his age based upon the commencement date and his date of birth, will automatically determine whether it is an account-based pension or maybe could have been a transition to retirement income stream, because we have inbuilt into this system here a calculation that he's 71 years of age. Therefore, he has already satisfied the condition of release of attaining age 65. So in that instance, all of that has been embedded into the code in here to ensure that people don't write or select the incorrect, not only condition of release, but the type of income stream. So you can see in here, what we've done now is we've asked, is the account balance known at the start of the income stream? And you have these 2 options now to either go, yes, it is known. And what I can do from here is I can then go in and naturally fill out all the information. Now, importantly, being an account-based pension here, it will only allow us to actually populate the unrestricted non-preserved fields, as opposed to the preserved and restricted fields if we did have a transition to retirement income stream. What you can also see here is if I say no, as I said before, we are then looking at what financial statements we may be completing for that particular year. And then we're looking at things like whether the pension is starting with the entire accumulation interest, with an amount maybe to the member's transfer balance cap, or potentially with a specific amount. And of course, you'll be able to put that specific amount in there. If you're starting with a specific amount, you might be going, well, aren't we just going to choose yes? No, it could be a specific amount, but we don't know the components of that income stream yet. So therefore, we need to confirm the components at a later point in time. Okay, so again, you've got multiple ways in which you can achieve this. The reality is probably going to be that once you've done the accounts, you'll then be utilizing a specific amount or amount with the entire balance to be able to do so. Okay, so the next part of this is then still going to ask things like who the reversionary is, and some of those sort of additional steps that we would see there as well, whether you intend on taking the minimum pension and the like. So I'm just going to leave it there for a second. We'll jump back to the slides and then I'll come back to some of that information shortly, but you can see some of the payment information that actually sits there. So this process now is a fairly significant shift that you can take advantage of. And when we think about the starting of the pension, this is why we are trying to address the risks that exist in the marketplace today about backdating. Okay, this concept of saying, well, we're not backdating, maybe we've just got the benefit of hindsight here. But what paragraph 12 of TR 2013-5 talks about is that quite clearly, further, the commencement date cannot occur prior to the day established as the commencement date in the terms and conditions as agreed between the member and the trustee that will govern the fund and the income stream of that fund. So again, this is where we've been very particular in our approach. Historically, it's been through that oral request that has occurred originally, but now we actually evidence this by either doing that if you already know the balance, but alternatively now you can introduce that two-step process that will formally recognize through the income stream documentation that it is to start at this point in time, and then the balance and that the componentry of that pension will be confirmed at a later point. Now, the other interesting thing here comes around our payment discretion. I'm going to jump back across to our documentation again shortly. And part of this is quite interesting because we have the ATO coming out and providing us with some interesting guidance around meeting the minimum pensions and particular issues around pension shortfalls. So again, looking at your pension documents, do they provide for discretion in dealing with the payments? Because when you look at your SMSF software pension documents, arguably they may not provide the flexibility to allocate from one pension to another or between members. And if we don't have that flexibility, then there are examples that would suggest that the pension standards won't have actually been met. Now, if the pension documents say that the payment must be monthly to meet the payment standards, then that is what you need to do. If the minimum pension is $3,000 a month or $36,000, but the pension contract, in essence, those documents say that the pension is required to be paid at $5,000 a month, then the trustee is bound by that decision. This is an example that the ATO has on their site that you can see on the top right-hand side. So one member receives two pensions and the trustee does not satisfy the minimum for one of those pensions, but does for the other. So member A is in receipt of two pensions. The member has withdrawn an amount well in excess of the minimum required for pension 1, but has failed to meet the minimum for pension 2. The trustee must ensure that each pension meets the minimum payment requirements. It is irrelevant that the combined income received by member A from the two pensions equates to an amount that is greater than the combined minimum of those pension payments required. Subject to satisfying all the conditions, the trustee may be able to apply to have that underpayment self-assessed subject to the amount in which that shortfall arises. In essence, what they're saying is if there's an obligation under my example to pay $5,000 a month for a $3,000 a month minimum pension, if there was a second pension and we were short on that, I believe that's inferring that we cannot reallocate from that other pension because the pension standards, the contract in which that pension is operating, wouldn't allow for you to do so. So what we do very particularly with our pension documentation is we make it very clear that at the request where the member is drawing a level of pension for the year, the trustee is, or the member is requesting to the trustee that they'll take at least the minimum. They arguably won't nominate an amount, but the payments will rest at the unfettered discretion of the trustee. So therefore, in my example, where we had $50,000 taken out, if we needed to pull 10 across and allocate it to pension 2 or even member 2, we would have the flexibility to do so as long as we have satisfied the minimum pension obligations for the year. Okay, so again, these are the sorts of things that you need to start to look for, because these may be the things that could get taken to task by the auditor, the regulator, or even in respect to benefit payments in the future where they come into question. So how do we deal with, therefore, these pension documentation within our deed? We use what we call a special rule of the fund. And this is where the pension documents that I was referencing before through our knowledge base, in essence, get annexed to the governing rules of the fund. So you can see here in Rule 1.8 that the fund will allow for the trustee to add, vary, change, or otherwise rules of the fund. And we may be able to create additional rules where are authorized for the creation of things like member pensions. As you can see there, any additional rule is to become a special rule of the fund where it's declared as such and may not be varied by any variation unless with the specific consent of the trustee and the member. So this is now where we can look to saying, well, if we do want to see changes to that pension, how can we achieve it? If we want to add a reversion, or if we want to remove a reversion, or if we want to change the level of reversion, all these sorts of terms and conditions that are part of the pension, we can alter as long as we have agreement between the trustee and the member to do so. And in many instances, those sorts of changes where clients might have age pension eligibility, Commonwealth Seniors Health Card eligibility, where they relate in particular to pre-January 2015, we don't prejudice the exempt status of those income streams prior to that date because we are making some of those specific changes. So the other couple of things here before we jump back into the documents that you need to think about: reversionary beneficiaries. So what level of reversion can or can't be included? Does it allow for it to revert back to tax dependents, adults, child beneficiaries? What impact is our new $3 million proposed threshold going to have on this? I could see potential percentages or dollar amounts coming into fruition if we don't see any adjustment to reversionary beneficiaries being impacted by this $3 million amount. And we will look at asset segregation. So do your pension documents allow us to set aside specific assets to support the payment of income streams? There are a number of strategies. So things like being able to make an election for payments above the minimum pension in a year. Can we elect to do that? Is it a separate process, or can we do that through our existing documentation? And we have introduced that not only into our pension commencements, but as part of our annual pension review as well. And this is crucial because this is prospective in the decision-making to ensure that a valid commutation is actually on foot. And the other thing that we're seeing more and more questions coming through in the orders that we're seeing on our site is things around signing capacities. The fact that we're getting more older SMSF members, their ability to be able to execute things where we have enduring powers of attorney in place. Not only is it around changes of trustees, but it's then impacting the ability to pay those income streams. So we're not yet finalized the changes with the EPA appointment, but shortly you will be able to have pension commencement documentation that will allow for multiple attorneys, so 1, 2, or even 3 attorneys to be able to sign that document on behalf of the member. And again, all in compliance with the requirements set out within section 17A, subsection 3. So let's jump back into our pension documentation again, or our form, I should say, because what you can see here is naturally those additional questions before. But what I'm going to do is go back to our question about yes or no, and I'm going to kind of take this journey through to the fact that we would now have a pension balance in play. And this becomes important because what we want to be able to now show you is some of those additional pieces to the puzzle in having an account balance. So here, where we may have said no originally, now we can say, is it as a result of an initial previous request? When was that request that was done? Put in our date, the financial statements that were completed, and then naturally, again, using our integration, we'd be able to populate a lot of this information. So I'm just going to put some numbers in here just to keep this fairly simple. So we've got $1 million benefit there. Are we starting with the entire balance, yes or no? We naturally have our calculation done of our tax-free and taxable portion. And when we get over the page, we're then starting to look at the requirements of the pension level that is going to be drawn for the year. And again, specifically, in terms of our minimum reduction, does the member, because we're choosing an amount that is going to be at least the minimum, does the member want to make an irrevocable election to treat this amount above the minimum? So if we say yes, well, then what we need to think about is well, what order are we going to be treating those above minimum pensions? So what number of priorities do we have here in respect to the income stream? So if we go to our tooltip, you can see here, as part of the election, you'll need to consider the order of priority in dealing with any above minimum payments. So if we don't have any accumulation account, then we're simply looking at it in the context of the clawback. But if we, of the commutation to allow for a clawback against the member's transfer balance account. Now, if we have multiple, then again, we need to contemplate to say, well, are we then taking lump sums first from the member's accumulation? And then are we taking a commutation? And if we are taking a commutation, well, what are the commutation rules? And within Smarter SMSF, it's 25.1G is the commutation rule there. Now, again, we have the discretion, or we can specify how often they're being paid. And again, that does become really important, as I said before, around that potential allocation that you can do in the future. So what we ordinarily see in the large majority of our clients that set up pensions in here is you are applying at least the minimum, and there's a trustee discretion in terms of how that comes out. Now, again, yes or no with reversionary. We have the particulars of that reversionary. You have a number of different relationships that reversionary. You can specify what and how that reversion works, percentage, dollar amount, or to a member's TBC. You can put the percentage in there as well. And then our final bit, which is unique naturally to us, is this concept of what we call our paramount document. So this is only allowed because of our Smarter SMSF deed. But what it says is, do you want this document to take precedent over any other document that may be in conflict with this document? So what does that mean in English? What it means is if you want this document that has a reversionary beneficiary to override any BDBN that may be in existence so that the reversionary would outrank that, then that is what would happen. Now, naturally, that is the approach that currently happens within the deed, but you can stipulate in a number of Smarter SMSF documents that you want a particular document to act as a paramount document. So if there was ever a document contested in a court of law, that document is intended to be the highest ranking document over anything else that is in place at that point in time. Now, one of the important things that I didn't touch on earlier is that people naturally ask to me, well, look, Aaron, we don't have the Smarter SMSF deed at this point in time for the client. So therefore, can we actually still use these pension documents? The short answer is yes, you can, because there is a very simple question that gets asked earlier on in this ordering process. And what it is simply saying, do you use the Smarter SMSF deed or not? And if you say, yes, you do, then what we have in here, and you can see this at the very beginning, okay? So if it's yes, then it will pre-populate Rule 25. If you say no, then you need to find the rule and move on from there. So if you say no, so that is you don't use the Smarter SMSF deed, we create the same template of documents here, but we remove two key features. One is that it doesn't become a special rule of the fund, so it doesn't annex itself to the deed, which is unique to our SMSF trust deed. And two, it doesn't introduce that concept of the paramount document, again, something that is unique to the Smarter SMSF deed. But the process around everything else, in essence, remains exactly the same. So regardless of whether you are using the Smarter SMSF deed or not, there are different templates that can be used, either Smarter SMSF templates or a more generic template set of pension documents that are available. But naturally, again, you need to be going back to your deed and understanding specifically what that deed requires in order to be able to generate those particular documents. So that's probably most of, I think, everything that I wanted to share within this process. Most importantly, when you get to the end of that particular order, we've got here, I'll just put yes there. We get to the end of the order, you'll be able to choose here whether you wish to segregate or keep the assets pooled. Again, if you choose yes to segregate, you'll be able to select all of the specific assets that you want to have. So if you choose yes, how many types of assets? So if it was 3, for example, you'd have to put your bank account first and then put the other assets, and they naturally have to marry off to give you your account balance. I'm just going to go no there for now, and then go next. Every order that you do, the last page that you'll be able to do is to review the information that you've got within the order. And when you submit that order, you will also get emailed to you that reference this information that you have here. So if I just go to my email, you'll be able to see here, not only do you get the order details, so you can see all that order that I had here before, you'll also get the additional note. Thanks for submitting with an unknown balance. There is a 2-step process that you can do here to explain that. You get your order confirmation that it'll be prepared, and then you get your actual documents to support that that pension documentation is now actually complete. And again, you can go through and see all the information through the sample document at another point in time. So when you submit that, again, subject to whether you are a member or you are a PAYG orderer of documents, if you order pay-as-you-go, you just need to apply your credit card here. If you are a member, naturally, it then is simply a submit, as you can see here, and then that will be reduced off your counter that you have when you order documents. So you can see that counter that sits at the top there. And you have, as part of this process under the subscriptions as well, some additional features that you can share this around the office in terms of from a staff member to a manager and so forth, if you want all that information reviewed previously or prior to the lodgement of that, or even afterwards, that manager will be able to go in and access that. And again, I'll touch on that in just a minute. So let's go now across and look at, I guess, just this ordering process, as I said. So there are a number of smarts as we've gone through here. We've got the ability to use the integrations. We can choose whether we want to start it as 1 step or 2 steps. We do all the calculations, as you can see within there, and you've got a lot of the flexibility in payments and the elections, as we spoke about as well. We have the ability for you to choose whether it aligns under the Smarter SMSF deed or with an external deed, and it gives you some of those key features that you see that are unique to Smarter SMSF when compared to others in the marketplace today. So a couple of things just to be aware then around what we do in this space with pensions, because it is very comprehensive in terms of not only our broader set of SMSF documents, but specifically with our SMSF pensions. So we do have pensions that deal with TRIS, account-based pensions, and death benefits. We have our lump sum suite, again, whilst the member is alive, and also death benefit lump sums. We have our rollbacks, our commutations, our annual pension reviews, which you can also do your above minimum pension, tristle retirement phase, minimum pension shortfalls, payments of reversionary pensions where a member has passed away and that documentation to automatically revert to the member. You want to make changes to existing income streams to add or remove. You want to have existing pension documents. You've upgraded to the Smarter SMSF deed, and you now want to attach those pension documents that may have been done separately previously as a special rule of the fund. You can do that sort of stuff as well. We have a number of other documents that we have templates for, like market link pensions, commutation and repurchase, commutation of DBPs to market link pensions, and we also have temporary incapacity income stream documentation available as well. Now, there's one there that I did deliberately overstep, and I'm going to come back to now, and that is our lost pension deed. It is a very unique document in the marketplace because what we have done is we have now developed something following the Narraman case in 2018 that allows you to try and re-establish a pension as being on foot where we don't have pension documents or the documentation that we have is insufficient. So we have a deed that affirms and confirms that the pension is actually in existence, and then develop a replacement set of pension documents that will apply going forward. So again, it's something that is quite unique in the industry, and be aware that we have that, and they are quite extensively used where people go through and realize that the documentation that they have is either not there or is that insufficient that we need to go and certainly neaten that up. And again, we will keep developing out these suites of documents to be able to support individuals as we move along, and things like the legacy pension conversions that have been previously spoken about in the government. So if we get the ability to unwind those legacy pensions, we will do work in that area as well to be able to support you where you may have clients impacted by that as well. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our subscription packages. We have a number of other sessions on these. You can go and have a look at this in your own time as well. But all I will say is that our subscription packages are clearly a more cost-effective way of doing things, and you do get much greater functionality around how this works as well. So the other thing I just wanted to also delineate here in the ordering process between a member and a pay-as-you-go member is, yes, you can connect to your SMSF software throughout this process. Yes, you can choose a document to order throughout this process. Yes, you can import your data using the software, but the distinguishing features start to come from there. So if you are a member, you can save that order and then you can have it reviewed by a manager. That is not available through the PowerYG process. Naturally, there's counters under subscription subject to the level of subscription that you have, as you can see on the previous slide, versus a simple credit card payment process. Access to the completed orders at a member level is available across the team that has access to the user console. Whereas in a PowerYG sense, it is strictly limited to that user and that user only. The ability to reset orders is a function of our members to be able to do. Yes, there is a caveat around that. You can't naturally go and reset company orders and things that have already been submitted to various parties. But if you've made a typo in a pension, for example, here, you would be able to do so. In a PowerYG sense, you would need to go back to us and we will review it and make the adjustments potentially there. In our, I guess, the support that we have for our members, in certain instances where we might need to just make some very simple adjustments to documents, it's not uncommon. We need to add an EPA, or we need to add specific clauses in for things like deed upgrades and whatever, where we're removing employer sponsors. Those sort of things are all included as part of the membership, whereas under a PowerYG, they're all part of an additional fee. So what am I talking about in respect to some of these membership benefits here? Well, I guess if we go into our Smarter SMSF platform here, under my account, we have our users' orders or our console here. And what we have is the ability for access for the different team members under the subscription. So the subscription sits under the business. We have the various staff under here. We have, in essence, what we call our parent-child. So the parent here is the owner of the subscription. You can have more than one individual here. So if you have a manager and a partner, and then you've got multiple staff underneath, you can have the partner and the manager as the parent. What that allows for to happen is that that parent has visibility over all of the orders. So the staff member that is doing that work can then provide, or that manager can have access to that information. We are working on, and hopefully finalizing shortly, the ability to add and remove individuals that are invited under the subscription. So you will then have full control over that process. And that's going to give you then access to not only the saved orders of all of the different team members here, but it will then, and therefore you can see in here, it will allow you to pick up the link of that and then go and review and then submit that information. But similarly, you'll be able to go into the completed orders area. Again, you can click on that individual staff member, and then you can download that particular document where that individual has now completed that information. So there's much more functionality, and we're continuing to build this area out that is going to own, or that is only available within the subscription, as opposed to on a pay-as-you-go basis. So let's wrap things up in here. So again, you can kind of see some of the things that I've just mentioned there around that subscription and what it ultimately gives you access to. So I guess in closing, some key takeaways, hopefully from today's session. Make sure your pension documents are appropriate, aligned to the fund's governing rules. Okay, it is absolutely fundamental going forward that you are ensuring that your deed and your documents actually do marry up. It's critical as well, therefore, to get your pension documents right, because we want to avoid any challenge ultimately that income streams were incorrectly established, and therefore it may be subject to challenge. And one thing I can absolutely guarantee you on that will happen in the future is there will be a court case that will challenge whether that reversionary was on foot or not. And therefore, because of the disconnect between the pension documents and the intended reversionary and the BDBN that may have been invalid, that gave discretion on how the benefits would be paid, there will be guaranteed a decision in the future that will test whether those pension documents were correctly aligned to the governing rules to have allowed that to occur. From an income tax point of view, I guess the courts aren't going to be worried about ECPI and all those sorts of things, but they will spend particular attention and detail on whether that pension was reversionary or not. So documentation is going to be king, and getting this right will be crucial. But it's not only that, it's also then taking advantage of the strategic opportunities that present as well. And those above minimum pension elections is one really good example there as well. And most importantly, it's not only maintaining currency of these documents, if you're trying to do some of this internally yourself, but it's then leveraging the technology. And this is where the integrations with Simple Fund 360, with Class and SuperMate now is going to save you time without compromising on the quality and helping you to manage that client risk as well. So that is it from me. If we do have any questions that you'd like to ask around the session, please, I'm happy to stay online and answer those for you now. We do have a number of things coming up to be aware of, including Tim and myself will be in Brisbane and Sydney next week for our SMSF Day events. So we are wrapping up registrations in the very near future. So make sure if you do want to attend, you get that done in the next sort of 48 hours. Our online course of the events will be released in the middle of next month as well. And we have a number of other sessions coming up that you can always keep up to date by visiting smartersmsf.com/events. Well, if there are no other questions, like I said, hopefully today has given you some great insight into the topic of pensions, what you need to be aware of as well, and what you need to be contemplating. If you would like some further information, sample documents, or you'd want even a specific demo inside your practice, please feel free to get in contact with us. I'll be more than happy to take that through with you. Other than that, I'm going to say goodbye from there with no other questions. Have a great rest of the day. Catch you soon. Bye for now.